Okay, well here we are at Pakefield, the church right on the coast at Pakefield, and I'm going to start to paint this lovely thatched roof church that's been here a long time, as you can imagine, and I'm going to start to paint. And I'm going straight in with the paint. So I'm starting off with a completely white paper, and then I shall start to lay the colour on straight onto the white paper. Okay, well I've just painted the basic outline of the church. I've put in
painting.
You like that?
And paint.
Yeah.
I think it's get more loose, really.
Yeah, it's the looseness, but you can still treat it fairly loose, you know.
So what sort of cut? I mean, that's a grey.
That's a grey.
Church.
I would say
stone, isn't it?
you need to actually get the grey.
Davies grey, or
You could use grey, but you can. Grey is a combination of the three primary colours. So you could use raw sienna, cobalt blue, and burnt umber, light red. Right. So you've got a red, yellow, and blue. Right. And if you mix them all together, you can get the aging of the stone. You can get a yellowy stone by having more yellow, a bit more.
Right, okay.
See what I mean?
I'll try that.
Yeah, you mix the whole three.
Grey.
Exactly. So I've gone in basically with a rich colour of raw sienna, but I'm going to allow that to dry, and then I'm going to go in and produce the sky. Okay, well I've damped the paper thoroughly at the top of the sky, down as far as the building and more or less either side of the church. Now I'm going to add some raw sienna with a touch of crimson, just to give myself quite a nice light glow to the sky at the top right hand corner. And all I've done is just stroke that in quite simply, a bit more yellow in there just to give it a bit of a glow. Let's go in with a little bit of lemon, just to let's see if we can really, there we are, nice big bold strokes of lemon at the top. Clean the brush slightly. It gives a nice glow coming down from the right hand side. And then I'm going to use crimson as my sort of shaping of clouds, really. That's more or less the thinking behind it all. As you can hear, we've got sheep in the background, and I'm going to put a couple of those in later on. Now I'm going in with ultramarine, so that's interesting, ultramarine blue and burnt umber. Now that's interesting. A bit of burnt sienna perhaps in there to give me like, just want to pick up one or two cloud shapes. So we're getting that nice, still leaving that bit of glow, and the cloud shapes will actually get smaller as we go away into the distance. There's a little bit there as well. And really the water's doing the job, you know, pulling the colour down really, you know. Then I'm going to use ultramarine in a strong mix with a touch of crimson, just to give me a nice strong blue in that top right hand corner, like that. Another little area there and another little area there. Let's bring those together. And this is slightly weaker at that point. There we go. And then another little area there. This is the blue patches.
Right.
of the
See,
sky.
I've got more kind of wash really.
That's all right. It's just, I mean, you can still go in, John. You can still go in.
Kind of lost this bit here really, I think.
You can. I mean, they're still wet. There's no reason why you shouldn't still go in with the stronger colour.
Bit of yellow.
Yeah, yeah. Bit of yellow, bit of blue. You know, trying to pick around the tower there, and some smaller cloud shapes either side there. That's good. Here we are, nice blue touches. And then finally I'm going in with the stronger cloud shadows, the undersides of the cloud, which is ultramarine and burnt umber. And I'm going to keep burnt umber fairly dominant in the mix because I want sort of like a bluey, a warm blue, so the burnt umber will dominate rather than so we end up with a cloud shadow there. There you go. And another one under there. Showing up the feeling of the undersides of the clouds really. Quite an unusual sort of feel, but I think that's worth the risk to try and give this picture just a little bit more sort of depth and character. Always remember it will dry considerably lighter. Now, yeah, and I'm going to lay the board down and allow that to soak in, and we'll leave it there for now and allow that to completely dry. Okay, well, I've laid the sky on, laid some colour onto the building, and I've now penciled in some of the basic outline drawing, so I've sharpened it all up a little. So my next job really is to give the building something to stand on. And me and John, who I'm painting with today, decided that perhaps a little bit of the distant water would be useful. So I'm going to use cobalt blue, because although, yeah, I don't know whether we can quite see it from here, but a touch of cobalt blue for the water in the distance. And I think that just gives it that added little touch to create that area of water in the distance.
That's better.
There you go.
So
that's the water. Yeah. So I've got to now do the grass itself, and going to start off with the bushes in the distance, and I'm going to use Prussian with raw sienna. That's my mix. More Prussian than raw sienna because I want a bluer green, and I'm using a large brush for this to cover quite a large area. And we've got a bush coming in here, which quite a spiky affair. Going to paint around any of the gravestones that we've got. A little more raw sienna to the mix now, and that hopefully will give us a sense of a bit more depth to the greenery. Trying to just pick around the gravestones at that point, because it shapes up the corner of the building and the gravestones themselves. So hopefully we can get, there's a small gravestone there, John. Weren't meant to be, but they're small now. There we are. So that's that side. Now this side, let's add more yellow, shall we? And try and just paint around there. Remove some of that. and trying to get a bit more openness to that one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm always all sort of closed up, really.
Yeah, well, you know, just a little bit of openness to it would help, but it's not, you know, make or break time at this present moment. But now I'm going to do the green for the land. I'm starting off with raw sienna with a touch of cobalt, but I want to keep this fairly sort of fluid, running across the paper, painting around the gravestones. That's quite an important thing to do, because I do need those to be left white paper. To try and keep the colour there, so I'm going to go in with just tidy that up with a bit more raw sienna. There we go. And plenty of raw sienna. Decided to introduce a couple of figures there with a dog. Paint around those. Trying to keep it nice and fluid. Sun's come out now, so obviously it's vital that we sort of move fairly quickly to enable us to paint doesn't dry. It's all very loose and rough. It really is more important to create a loose feel to the painting rather than a too solid sort of designed look, really. Paint around the sheep. It's another important area. I'm told that that's quite an important part of this church, where they graze the sheep. So we need to put those in if possible, and that really gives the building something to sit on. So in the next stage I'm going to be looking at painting a bit of detail onto the building. Okay, well, I'm continuing now, producing the edging. That is the actual yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's really the edging of the tower and the church itself. It's the stonework really around the edges, which I'm going to put in now. Well, I've made a start. I'll just show you for a short spell of time exactly how that's done. Windows like that, on top of the buttress areas, one there, one there. It's raw sienna with a touch of cobalt blue perhaps, or burnt umber, something like that, just to knock that colour back. And then I'm putting in the window areas and the sections inside the windows, the sill, those sort of, you know, just where the lighter stonework is. And that's the way you treat these buildings. You paint in the lighter stonework. The door surrounds, yeah, the door surrounds at the front, that's that one there, and the deep door reveal. And while I have that colour, I'm going to add cobalt blue with that, with a little light red, because I want a grey, a bluey grey for the gravestones. So, leaving the right hand side where the sun is catching unpainted. See that? The way I'm painting those leaving the right hand side unpainted, because that's quite important.
So,
Gravestones, probably. Yep. I've made mine a little on the greyer side, so I've added.
That little buttress there.
Yep. Yeah. Any of the buttress areas.
What about the porch bit? Is that there?
Just the door surround, really. That's all I'm going to.
Just around the top of the door.
Yep. Yeah, I think that probably is sufficient. I'm just finishing off quickly those areas. We'll leave the sheep. So that's really the next. Okay, well, I've put in the surrounds of the windows and the side wall, sides of the wall. Now I'm going to add a little bit more. I've already done the gable end there, the tower end there. I'm now going to paint in what in effect is the actual flint work. I'm picking around here and there, trying to suggest some form of flint. That's it. Yeah, that's about the grey. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for sort of greys, really, as much as anything. Not necessarily a real dirty grey, but a grey that's got a little bit of colour to it. That's why I've introduced light red and raw sienna with the cobalt blue to give that grey effect, and paint each individual section, in other words, of the tower, right hand side, left hand side, leaving one or two little bits of white paper unpainted. Got to remember, this is not the shadow area, this is purely the stonework itself. And also there is the right hand side of that the left hand side of that buttress that will stand out once we get the shadow on. I've also introduced a couple of figures, so I'm going to leave that very shortly. Put those in very shortly. A bit more raw sienna now to try and get a real bit of light onto the front of the building. So that's that. There, painting around the figures, because the figures are quite important in this subject. Painting across and around those buttresses. Don't quite go up to the roof, so that's a useful thing. I'm going to treat the buttresses later in a slightly different colour, a little bit darker, just to suggest shadow. Paint around the gravestones and any of the windows that you previously suggested. There's a door there, paint around that. Buttress area, working my way out to the outside edge, small line between that, and that's the window. All of these areas will be shown up when we come to add shadow. So vital that we don't add the shadow too early. And yeah, a bit more yellow then onto the front edge. And I'm making it extremely weak. It's when you do that part of the tower, John, just add a bit more yellow to it. So that's bluer, and that's got a bit more yellow in it. And you see this area here, John, I'm actually going to paint that even lighter. And I'm painting over those brick edgings because they are actually within the brickwork, within the stonework. That's too much yellow, it's too much blue probably. So all you need to do is just rinse it and just slightly remix That's all you need. Yeah, it's just little areas of colour that make all the difference, you know.
So what was it? It was
Raw sienna, cobalt blue and light red. The famous
sienna,
Fletcher Watson mix.
sienna.
Okay, so that's the walls, the buttress areas. Just got one or two other little touches. Then we're going to look at the windows.
Needs just.
Yeah, well, what I've actually done, I've
Just a bit.
completed the front of the building, and we're now in the process of just painting the windows. If you notice, the windows that face the light on the right hand side are of a bluey colour. That's Prussian blue, probably on its own. The door and the louvers at the top and the rest of the windows, more or less on the shadow side, is actually burnt umber, mainly burnt umber for the doors, but with ultramarine to make it darker for the real dark windows. I've also just strengthened the trees either side, just to give a little bit of feeling of depth. And the next stage will be really putting in sheep. I do have a couple of figures to go in, but overall, you know, at the moment, so far so good. And then when I come to the shadow part, I'm going to run the video to show you how to put the final touches on.
There you go.
Okay,
Right,
well,
okay.
I've put in the sheep, quite simply,
Yeah,
raw
yeah.
sienna, burnt umber, and the heads and the legs are burnt umber and ultramarine. Popped in a couple of little figures, but the main event of this is the shadows. Right, to get that shadow work, I'm going to use ultramarine, so I'm mixing up a good mix of ultramarine, and remember, these are large areas because it's quite a large sheet of paper. Oh, I'm going to use crimson or alizarin because I'm looking for a purpley colour. Right, so it's a red and a blue, but to knock that back, it's quite purple, which is quite good. To knock that back, I'm going to use raw sienna, and that mellows that shadow. There you go. And a little bit more blue, a little bit more raw sienna. Just gives that shadow a bit of, takes away the and the thing is, when you start these shadows, do the areas that really don't matter quite so much. That's the areas that, a bit more yellow with that, they are the areas that you need to do first, because you can almost get away with any sort of shadow there. Just leave a small bead, because the sun is coming from the right, so that's casting a shadow onto this build, and that shapes up that corner. Over the windows, they almost disappear, but they will shine through again shortly. There is overhanging shadow from the greenery above there, which comes down the front of the, it just helps to hold that in. And also there is a shadow cast from the wall, but there is also a area there. So that's nice and dark, nice bit of depth. Now I'm going to add more raw sienna to that to give it a bit of warmth, because that's a distant shadow. Now I'm going to add burnt sienna and raw sienna to give the shadow even a more mellow touch. And this won't be quite as heavy, and we're going to catch light onto the area at the front of those constellations, so you can see light hitting the front. I'm going to leave a bead on top, and then that stands out and comes back. Right, so this is all in shadow. That mullion is in shadow. But I may decide to only shadow that right hand side of that. Maybe that it's not in complete shadow. See what I'm saying? Maybe it just has a little bit of light catching that architecture. A little bit sticks out there again, a little bit wider. A little bit of light there. And all that must finish quite straight, because that's a dead corner, that is. Okay, there we go. And slowly we'll work our way down. And because we're using ultramarine, we mustn't paint back. We do need to be very careful we don't lift off the underpainting, which is so easy to do at this stage. Windows are left unpainted right the way across, and there's a lovely shadow that extends there. Good. So that's the shadow area to that. Next, I'm going to then paint. Oh, there will be shadow on that section there and that section there. There will be some shadow under there, like that. And there's also a gargoyle of some sort there, but we're not certain how that looks, but we'll suggest it. Now, the underside of this and inside that window, plenty of paint on that, and all of a sudden that gives it depth. Then there is a shadow here from the overhang of the roof. That could be gently cast on here, but at this stage I'm going to just assume that the light is only just coming round, paint around any figures, leave those in sunlight at this stage. Now, more burnt sienna going in to make a rich, warm shadow, which will be under there, the overhang of that, and the overhang of that there, and the continuation of that there, right the way through, up to there. Right, there we go. Now that's a nice warm shadow. Then I'm going to have a shadow inside that window, dropped into that window, inside there, I think where we are, inside that window and down to there. Is this one arched? No, that one's straight again, across, down, arched and down. And all of a sudden, the whole thing begins to take on a different sort of shape. Just lift that back, gone down a little far with that. Ease that back a tad. There we go. That's it, that's pretty much that. And then I'm going to shadow this area here, leaving perhaps that window a little bit less tense. There we go, coming along. Now I'm adding more blue now, just to ring the changes and to give us a little bit more of a purpley colour. I always like to change your colours a little as I paint, so that you don't always have the same colour in all of your shadows. It adds another dimension to the whole thing. That's down there. These are the buttress areas. Yep. That quite important on churches. Very much a feature of church architecture. Quite often we have a bit of an overhang there, and there. Okay. Oh, just the inside of that. There's a little area there. There's a door here.
Didn't put the door in.
Well, there you go. That's pretty much there. And then, of course, we have the overhang of this, which is running like that, and down onto the roof line. Then we have the the ridging for the thatch, which will have a shadow to give it sunlight, and I'm going to paint all of these, well, some of them anyway, in shadow, and the benefit of that will show up once I put any shadow onto that. Now I'm going to use brown now, so burnt umber for what the rest. There's a bit of an angle there. Notice how I'm changing from a cool to a warm colour. That one's straight, finishing around there. This one's a little darker. That one's very close to that one. That one there. That one there. They show up because of the sunlit heads. Okay. That is beginning to come along, and then finally another one there. Made that more blue so it stands out. Bit of shadow for the figures because they will be in shadow. Shadow there. Shadow under the sheep. Very important for them to sit onto the ground. There you go. Lovely sunlit. And then finally, before we finish, I'm going to use a little bit of license now and put in a nice dark green. And it needs to be quite blue green, not too rich because the whole picture is not over rich in colour. We've got a monument to do. I'm going to damp the paper, trying to create a bit of atmosphere now within the picture, and paint across with this dark green. A little bit more blue, a little bit of brown in there, just to give it a bit more sort of richness to it. There we go. Lovely deep sort of cloud shadow, which is always a useful thing to do. And I'm going to put that sheep in part shadow, and it's always a good thing to do because it shows them up particularly well. And that shadow is going to run off out into the distance like that. That's going to come down across that area there and completely close that outside up. And then we're going to just streak in. We don't want that to rise. We want that to be quite streaky and light. And then this one is going to be in half shadow. So get rid of all the white around him. And that will then just sweep away, up that, across that. That's going to have shadow, 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 shadow. Put these up in a sort of a bluey shadow. Oh, that'd be nice. See how it's blended in, and we create a cross effect there by using that. There we go. And really spreading that through. And it's a matter of getting mood into the picture, really. You know, that to me is basically what it's all about. It's just trying to get a bit of mood there. Just before I think, I'm going to really add something a bit deep to that bottom right hand corner, just before it dries. Go, that'll spread in. Yeah, that's looking quite good. That's pretty much there, John. Honestly, I think spread that the other side. Just keep introducing that. Spread that through. And I think overall, don't want any sunlight on the back of the figures. That would all be in shadow. That will be a small little gravestone of some sort that will then have a shadow to it. And there will be, along the edge here, a little bit of edging to the path that will just gradually blend into that soft area. and just want to introduce a little light, a bit of sunlight onto those buttress areas so they really begin to shine, but I don't want to lose those. And I think that's pretty much there, really. One or two little touches, birds in the sky possibly. There is some edging that I will do very shortly, but that's basically the shadows. Just a little bit more sharpening.
Right.
But other than that, that's the... Okay, well, I'm back home now, and that's the finished painting. As you can see, I've put in one or two additional details. Little bit of edging around the brickwork, sharpening up of one or two edges. But it was a really enjoyable day on the Suffolk coast, depicting this lovely view. If you enjoyed that, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Stay tuned, and we'll be uploading more very shortly. Thank you very much for watching.